everybody's course and all that. You got Iyad Alawi, who was Bush's puppet dictator of Iraq for a little while there, former Saddam murderer and then CIA murderer. And he's nominally a Shiite, but he gets along really well with the former Ba'athist because he used to be one, and really was in large part responsible for the civil war of a couple of years ago, which the Sunnis lost. The Sunni-based insurgency lost. He's got his party, and then you have Muqtada al-Sadr, who has basically inherited all of the Iraqi National Alliance because Abdul Aziz al-Hakim, the leader of the Supreme Islamic Council, died. And they lost a lot of influence. And Muqtada al-Sadr has basically inherited the entire Iraqi National Alliance. Nouri al-Maliki, the current prime minister's party, which broke off from there. He's a member of the Dawa party, which was actually founded by Muqtada al-Sadr's father and uncle. But he broke off. And so we've been talking with Jason on the show here about Iraqi politics since March, or, well, longer than that, but since March, since this election happened. Alawi came out just barely ahead with the more kind of nationalist faction there, with the plurality, but not enough to form a government. And then here we are wrapping up October, and still no one has been able to form a government in Iraq. And as Jason and I have talked about this whole time, the natural alliance would be Sadr's bloc and Nouri al-Maliki's bloc. Of course, there's bad blood there, and of course, Maliki did break off from the Iraqi National Alliance, like I just said. However, they're on the same side. The winning majority that America fought a war to install in power, the Friends of Iran. And so now this obvious natural alliance in the parliament that would form a majority government there is, according to Jason, being now blocked by Barack Obama, who is saying no government can include Muqtada al-Sadr. Because what? He wants to have another war in Najaf or what, Jason?
I'm not sure what he's thinking, but he seemed to be of the mind that none of Sadr's supporters, which of course are most of the Iraqi National Alliance at this point, can take any part in the government, and that he should boot them out of the coalition. The obvious question then is there a coalition left, or is Maliki back to square one with just his bloc and then a few supportive Kurdish factions that aren't nearly enough to form a government?
Well, and the other question is, and this could be something, assuming that Jim Jones, which, funny as we all commit murder-suicide here in the American Empire, the National Security Advisor's name is Jim Jones. I gotta love that. But assuming he knows anything about this stupid war that he's fighting up there, perhaps, Jason, he's explained to Barack Obama that, look, man, if Maliki and Sadr form an alliance and a government, then that means that the Sunnis are entirely left out. And the reason that they quit fighting basically was because they lost Baghdad in the Civil War, and Petraeus promised them, we're going to work to make sure that you guys are part of the government. And if they continue to be excluded, then, I don't know, it's not like they could launch an attack really to take back Baghdad at this point, but they could certainly arm up and refuse to participate in this government at all, and we could see an outbreak of major hostilities again. Not that it's been peaceful over there at all this whole time, but there hasn't really been a concerted insurgency campaign like we saw back in, 2004, especially through 7, 8. So, perhaps that has something to do with this, huh? Like, hey, man, if George Bush turned the whole government over to the Iranians, but they promised the Sunnis that it wasn't going to be like that if they just had patience.
Well, that could certainly be part of it, and there really is a growing sense of disillusionment among the Sunnis. Of course, after Alawi basically won the March election, there was this sense that the Sunnis were going to finally have a voice in the future of Iraq, and now it looks like even though there are far more Sunnis in parliament than there were in the last government, they're going to have considerably less influence than they did before.
Now, did you read that Bob Dreyfus piece the other day about, he brought up that guy al-Mahdi from the Supreme Islamic Council as some kind of compromise. And if I remember right, back in 2005, that's who George Bush and Condi Rice were pushing for after the election, the election in January '05 that really precipitated the Civil War. That's who they wanted, was this guy al-Mahdi from the Supreme Islamic Council. But is there any indication that Muqtada al-Sadr would put up with that at this point?
Well, Sadr seemed to have been floating that idea for a while, but
really?
Maliki was the one that seemed to have a problem with it. I mean, Maliki's whole faction has insisted all along that he's the only one that can be allowed to be the prime minister, and there can't be any compromise on that issue under any circumstances. And for a while there, it actually looked, and this was a few weeks ago before the Maliki-Sadr alliance started to reform, that Alawi had actually backed down and said, okay, we're going to let Adel Abdel Mahdi be the prime minister, and Alawi can be president or something like that. And basically, Sadr's faction, the Iraqi National Alliance, would have been even though they're the smallest of three major factions, they would have had the prime ministership.
Yeah. Well, I see here one of your news articles at news.antiwar.com is disillusioned U.S. allies in Iraq rejoin insurgency.
Right. There's been reports that the Awakening Council, the Sons of Iraq, which of course haven't been treated very well by the Iraqi government to begin with, are getting less and less willing to stick around, although some of them, according to the reports, are sticking around enough to collect their paychecks and are just supporting the insurgency on their own time.
It's they're in a real bad spot. There's really nothing they can do, as Patrick Coburn has explained over and over on this show. They lost the Civil War. They lost Baghdad. America helped Muqtada al-Sadr and the Iranians win it, and the Badr Brigade and all them ethnically cleanse, they call it. Not ethnically, but whatever. Sectarian cleanse the Sunni Arabs from Baghdad. So they're not really in a position to try to take Baghdad back at this point. That was kind of why they called or cried uncle and made the deal with Petraeus. But all Petraeus really did was pay them off to stop fighting temporarily and make them a bunch of promises. So that doesn't mean they've gone away. It just means that they've been waiting. And I guess we'll see. And I guess we know for a fact that you'll be keeping an eye on it for us. So thanks, Jason. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about more topics. I hope I can have you back later in the week and catch up on some more things.
Sure.
Good work as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody, that's Jason Ditz. News.antiwar.com. This man reads every paper on earth for you every day.